Good afternoon, everybody. Warm welcome to this seminar hosted by Fores in collaboration with the European Liberal Forum, ELF. I'm Ulrika, and I'm the director of Fores. Tonight we'll be presenting our new policy report on the circular economy in Europe, written by researchers Mattias Lindahl and Carl Dalhammar. This report is a part of a larger project on the next steps for EU climate policy, so stay tuned for more upcoming events and policy papers. And with that, I am happy to hand over to Anna, that will moderate this seminar.
Thank you, Ulrika, and a warm welcome to everyone. My name is Anna Willman, and I'm a climate policy specialist here at Fores. And as many of you know, the EU has in many ways taken a leadership role in global climate action by setting ambitious targets and implementing landmark policies like Fit for 55. But as we look ahead, we at Fores have been asking, what's next? And one area where progress is still falling behind is the transition to a circular economy, one that maximizes resource efficiency and minimizes waste. But despite the great economic potential that this shift actually offers, the pace of change has been slow, even here in Europe. So, what needs to change? What reforms are needed to accelerate the shift to a circular economy? How can the EU and also individual member states take the lead? And how can we ensure that this transition empowers businesses rather than holding them back? These are among the key questions we'll dive into this evening. And now I'm pleased to hand over to Alva Finn, Executive Director of the European Liberal Forum, who will also be a part of our panel later. Over to you. Yes.
Hi, yes, I'm Alva. I'm from the European Liberal Forum. We are the network of liberal think tanks, political foundations across Europe. Fores is one of our members and a very unique member in that they are focused in many ways a lot more on green and clean policies than some of our other liberal foundations. So I'm very happy to be opening this event. And as Ulrika already said, there's a lot more to come, which I think is really important because we didn't do very well in the European elections just recently. And I think one of the problems is that we are not updating liberalism in terms of some of the challenges that we're facing. So we at the European Liberal Forum are focused on a whole area of technology and sustainability and how we can have a more hopeful agenda for sustainability that a little bit differentiates us from, for example, from the Greens. You know, I think a lot of the narrative has been, you know, the world's going to end, etc. But actually, I think if we look at technology and circular economy and changing capitalism for the better, this is and showing market-based approaches to dealing with climate change and also improving our society and our lives. This is how we can show people that they should be voting for Liberals on the ballot in the coming years. And Fores is leading among our network on this kind of new narrative on sustainability for all. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to next year and the publications that will be coming forward and also for the next mandate in the European Parliament. So we have made some progress on circularity, but there's a lot more to do. There's still some crucial pieces of legislation that need to be passed and they need to be done in a way that don't just show the challenges, but also the opportunity for technology, for society and for industry. So thanks to the two authors of the report, because I read it on the way here and I think it's a really good addition to the catalogue of work we have on circular economy from the European Liberal Forum. We do a lot of things like stakeholder dialogues, for example. We did one on the repair directive with one of our MEPs where we brought industry and civil society, social economy enterprises together to talk about circular economy. We also did a previous publication with Fores on planned obsolescence. Thankfully, we've moved forward since that last publication. And yeah, we will be doing a lot more as well with the next commissioners and members of the European Parliament on creating this circular social economy going forward. So thanks so much for having me, and I'll be on the third panel. Exactly. So you'll hear a little bit more from me later.
Yeah, thank you, Alva. And now it's time to hear from the authors of the report. Mattias Lindahl, professor at Linköpings University, and Carl Dalhammar, associate professor at Lund University. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Wait.
Thank you very much. My name is Carl. I'm a researcher at Lund University, and I do most of my research in different industry research programs where we are struggling with how to help circular business models through public policy and law. And also more generally, a lot on product regulation. How do we make products live longer, become repairable? How do we promote right to repair and so on?
And my name is Mattias Lindahl. I'm a professor at Linköpings University. I'm also a guest professor at IIIEE Technical University. And I do research related to circular economy and have a lot of projects and have had a lot of projects actually with companies trying and doing this. And I'm also involved in the work with the new ISO standards and also SEN standards related to circular economy.
Yeah, thank you. And the report is, we didn't have so many words, and here we have 10 minutes, so there'll be some examples, but don't worry, we have hundreds of research papers if you're interested. Come back to us. So just to give an idea, what have EU done on circular economy? Quite a lot, but critical raw materials, new industrial plan, but also more concretely, revision of waste law, with having municipalities having to collect more different waste fractions and so on. We also have new textile, student producer responsibility scheme for textile, but also for new types of plastics. We have trying to address single-use plastics to change design, change behavior, to reduce them. We have a lot of product rules that aim to support longer lifetimes, repairs, and combat product destruction. I will show them in a minute. And also what's coming up lately are recycling markets are struggling. They're not doing too well, material losses, no one wants to pay for ugly recycled plastics. How do we resolve that? Well, one way that's coming now for car batteries, for PET bottles, but also probably for cars soon, we enforce recycled content. In a new product, you have to have recycled content. So we ensure there is a demand, because there has to be. Next slide, please. Now, if you're a company, right now we know, because we work with them, you think too much is happening in circular economy. On the left side, you have all the supply chain regulations, which I won't talk about today. But then if you look at different interventions points along the product life cycle, you also have lots of stuff happening. So when you design a new product, we have these recycled content obligations coming in. You have different new eco-design requirements related to durability and repairability. I'll give an example in a minute. So there's going to be a lot on that side. And then at the point of sale, we have other stuff happening. We have the Green Claims Directive. You're no longer going to make all these kind of claims that are not verified by a third party. We have over 200 eco-labeling schemes that many are of deficient quality, so we're going to straighten these rules. We're going to have much more information to the consumer about repairability and lifetime of a product, which I'll show also in a second. And then in Europe, we try to combat product destruction. We know that a lot of textiles, a lot of cheap electronics are never used. They're overproduced. There are e-commerce returns. That is not okay to just throw away new clothes. So European Union has now banned destruction of shoes and textiles, and there will be reporting requirements for other types of products. And then in the use phase, we will see more things happening. There's going to be spare parts, software updates, because there are regulations about it. But also we have the right to repair directive, provision of spare parts. It's going to become a bit more possible and attractive to repair your product. The problem we have, then we have the end of use phase, where we also try to promote reuse, high quality recycling and so on. But what we see for many product groups now, like batteries, electronics, plastics, is that all these rules they're not always well coordinated, which is the first challenge for product regulation. Next slide, please. So just to make this less, some of these rules you won't notice, but the manufacturers will. Other things we will notice. So next year, when you buy a cell phone, there will be more spare parts, software updates, because that's mandated in law. But also you have this mandatory energy labeling, where you, well, actually you won't see it in here because of the screen there, but it will be a drop test. How well does it perform in a drop test? And behind the screen is how repairable is it in a score card, basically. All right, next slide, please. How can EU strengthen the current framework? We'll give some examples here. One is, what do companies with a circular business model need? We have interviewed them. They all want targets for a circular economy. They know things will happen if they get a target. They all want to continue with eco-design and other product regulation requirements, because all kind of regulation that improve product repairability, quality, can also help reuse, repair, and so on. They want the product policy and law to be well coordinated, and they need standardization to support it. Next slide, please. The first thing then is targets. Why do we need it? Well, if you go back in time, we got these 20-20-20 targets for climate, energy efficiency, renewables. That led to a lot of change. We interviewed clean tech companies and investors and said, once we had these targets, we knew we could go for this. Easier to get funding, you knew other policies would follow, etc. We hear from companies that if we start to get targets for the circular economy, they will seep into public procurement. They will come and support them in various ways. And of course, targets can take different forms, and we might say right now, can we say an absolute target for how much resource we use? No. But if we go back 30 years, the current climate targets of the EU were also politically impossible. So we need to start this process. And some industry actors, for instance, Danish Industry Association has promoted that Denmark should have these targets and they should coordinate it with climate targets, because we know climate and circular economy is two sides of the same coins. For instance, a lot of climate technology will require more resources, so we need to look at them together. Next slide, please. I didn't check the clock, but you'll tell me if I'm over time.
Fine.
Yeah. One thing we also need to think about is legal flexibility. And this is very tricky. We need to coordinate the legal frameworks, but we also need to update them. So just to give one example, we have a new battery regulation, and we look at current electric cars and we say, they contain a lot of valuable materials, they have this lifetime and so on. Now the Chinese are pushing this iron phosphate batteries, and then all these assumptions might be wrong. They don't contain these valuable materials. The lifetime may be much longer than the car. Who knows? So we both need to coordinate rules, and we need to update them due to technological improvements. And probably, and this is something we discuss in the paper a little bit, simplify the rules. There are a lot of detailed rules, and of course we're all struggling. How can we make them less and more of the overall target, which is not easy, obviously. We give some examples in the paper. We also need to look at things together. We want to promote right to repair. It includes software, digital right to repair. Is that in line with cybersecurity laws and so on? A lot of industry people say no. We need to coordinate this stuff. Next slide, please. And then a little bit in the paper, but maybe more in our other research paper, how can the member states complement EU policies? Just the other week, we got a big Swedish inquiry on market-based instruments for the circular economy, and they rightly concluded most stuff happened at Brussels. We have to our national policies have to realize that most stuff happens in Brussels. What can we complement them with? And one thing that's coming in many EU member states is, for instance, repair vouchers and other stuff to make circular behavior like repairs more economically attractive. This is stuff that we can regulate at the member state level. Another thing we can regulate for sure is, or mandate, is public procurement. Both what we should do, which product groups we should look at, but also how we develop life cycle costing criteria and so on, which is something the industry also have asked for. Other things, I still have a minute, or? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, you do.
Yes. Oh, okay. One thing coming up now is, for instance, that European policymakers think we're going to promote right to repair and we're going to repair more. Now that we interview the repair sector, it's like, it's not a given that young people want to be repairers. It's not a given that the repair sector wants to grow. For instance, bike shops tend to like it in their street corner. So member states have a lot of role to play in maybe educating these people, having certification schemes, making it more attractive and so on to take these jobs, which will need fewer academics like us, more people who do something. And of course, other stuff, infrastructure for reuse and recycling. We're not far from Eskilstuna, well, the world's first reuse and recycling mall is. So stuff like that. Yes. Next slide then. I think that's me. And Mattias, you say something smart here.
Yeah. Wrap it up, because we decided he should be the main presenter. I think there are also challenges. We have been writing a lot, and we have more information, but we had to condense things into this report. So please contact us if you have more questions. For example, the right to repair. There are challenges with that, because it could also be an argument for some companies, in order to make it possible to repair, that they need to weaken the product to make it actually less durable. And then they can blame the EU that this is their fault. And just because you have the right to repair doesn't state that you regulate the price of the spare parts, etc. So there are challenges, things you need to balance. And when it comes to public procurement, I think that is requested by a lot of people out there, organizations. But the thing is, some governments, they have, okay, we should use it, but they're not really forcing the authorities to actually use it, to put the pressure on them to actually use this very good tool to do public procurement or more circular solutions, having more life cycle perspective. And then we also, of course, have the life cycle perspective and life length. I mean, if you go back to, I want just to step back a few, to this, oh, no, I was too fast. Sorry for that. This labeling, one information that is actually missing here, and we didn't mention that in the report, is actually life length, the planned life length of the product. To just get the information about the energy consumption, etc., it doesn't really give the whole important information needed. I mean, the life or length of the product. If you started to add that, it will be a competitive advantage actually for producers to increase the life length. If it's short, most likely people will not buy it. If it's long, people will buy it. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you managed to cover a lot, so well done.
Thank you.
You can take your seat again. Yes, an applause. Very good. And now I'd like to invite our first panel to the stage that will share the industry perspective on the circular transition. So welcome up Kalle Tedin, Vice President Sustainability at Husqvarna Group. And I would say iconic Swedish manufacturing company that's been running since 1689, is that correct? Yes. And nowadays it's mainly focused on outdoor and garden products. And then we have Cecilia Nyqvist, CEO of TECO, the Swedish Trade and Employers Association for companies working in the textile and fashion industry. Welcome up.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, can I just, get the right slide here? Great. So I'd like to start by asking both of you, how do your respective companies or the companies that you represent approach and integrate circular economy principles? Are there any good examples? Would you like to start, Kalle?
I can start. Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty proud of what we do on one of our key sustainability target areas, which is circularity. We have 3: carbon, circular, and people. And actually, we launched our current strategy and also the target to introduce 50 new circular innovations by 2025. And I mean, this is basically based on sort of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation principle, even though we have boiled it down to sort of the Husqvarna way of doing things. So we have reduce, reuse, remanufacture, and repair and recycle. So basically, we are qualifying our innovations through these criterias. And we have an internal jury that basically qualifies these innovations. And then when they are publicly launched, so basically when they are on the shelves, we grant them as a circular innovation. Now, obviously, there is a certain sort of subjectivity in this. And the reason for that is I would say, extreme lack of standardization when it comes to circularity, and I guess we'll talk about that later, because that's one of the really big obstacles to get through with circularity. One example, concrete, is that we are a couple of years ago we launched a collaboration together with IIIEE, where we placed sheds in neighborhoods. They are labeled grannboxen, and basically it's a sharing model where you can actually subscribe to use the typical garden equipment like a lawnmower, chainsaw, hedge trimmer, or whatever, and basically share that among. I mean, these are seldom used products, and still we have them. Everyone who owns a house probably has a lawnmower there, and it doesn't need to be that way. So that's just one of the innovations that we qualified.
Very interesting. Cecilia.
Well, a lot of textiles are in the really the eye of the EU lawmaking right now when it comes to circularity in every way. In the report, it's a lot of textiles in there because it's coming. Legislation when it comes to that part of business is big, and I think that I represent TEKO, which is the textile manufacturers of Sweden. So it's both fashion, but it's even more textiles. And you might wonder, do we have a textile industry in Sweden, or do we all remember the 60s and 70s when everything went abroad? And the answer to that question is yes, we do. And that is an industry that is highly high-end products, really a lot of special products that we work with. And I think sustainability and circularity is really in the focus of those companies. You can also talk about the fast fashion, and that is something else. And there is the circularity that is another question. But I know that there are a lot of things going on with circularity and fast fashion as well. But if I take a few examples from our members, when it comes to circularity, we have Kasthall. Some of you might own a carpet or would want to own a carpet from Kasthall.
I do.
They're quite expensive, but they have started to use the residue that they have in the production and make new yarns and make carpets out of that. And that I think is really a good way of using the circularity and using all the products and the materials that they have in their factory. Well worth the visit. We have Artex, which comes from the iconic city of Mjölby. Well, I'm from Mjölby, so I know. but they do a lot of stuff. But they are changing upholstered seatings for trains and airplanes and buses and cars and boats. So they have the metal parts left, and then they just put away the parts that are in textile that are dirty and can't be used anymore, and they use that for other stuff, and then they put on new fabric that is from recycled material as well. And that is typical of Swedish way of working with circularity, I think, in the textile industry. And then we have also all those when it comes to fibers, because that is the groundwork of textiles, of course, the fibers that you make into yarn, that you make into fabric, and all that. And we have quite a few Swedish companies that work in developing new fibers, like Treatus Textiles or Södra and Circulose. And so there are a lot of things going on when it comes to circularity in the textile business.
Great to hear that. But if we talk about the challenges then, what would you identify as the main barriers or challenges that your respective industries face in transitioning to a circular economy?
Well, there are a lot of them. I mean, at large, Husqvarna Group today is still very much as it was 330 years ago. Very linear company. We get components and materials in through the gates, and then we develop and produce our chainsaws, and then we send them off and we forget about them. And of course, we are trying our best to really work on sturdiness, durability, lifetime, etc., and even repairability. That's one thing. But then to really close the loop, we are very much more dependent on other actors in the industry, and typically the recyclers, and so they are really key players, which of course we are working together with them. But I think the biggest issue by far, obstacle by far, is the reverse logistics. I mean, how do we trace all this equipment that we have sold, millions of robotic mowers and chainsaws? I mean, how do we get them back? How do we have the master data to bring it back to us and to really close the loop for us? And it's very, very expensive. It will definitely introduce new CO2 emissions if we're going to send them back to us to work with the material to disassemble and give them new life. So that is one very big obstacle. Actually, another, and I want to connect to the grannboxen case. I mean, the human behavior, or the way that we, have our norms, is quite a big thing when it comes to especially sharing models. I mean, you just think about your closest neighbors that you might have, and if you would pick up a chainsaw that has a dull chain, and you have subscribed for this solution, of course you wouldn't be happy, and you would start, thinking about, okay, that was that neighbor. He's never been into the details and taking care of his stuff. I know that, and I'm going to leave this. I'm going to buy my own. I'm going to have full control of my own stuff, and I really want to own my own stuff. So that's also a big obstacle. I mean, the market acceptance and the norms is simply not there. So it's also very, very hard to find good revenue models for truly leveraging on new business models. I think so. For us, it comes back to that what we really can do here now is to work with the lifetime of our products to make them as material efficient as possible. And to some extent, you mentioned that about the lifetime, and of course, it tends to be like that. The more lifetime we give our products, the more scarce materials we use as well. So it's not an easy balance equation to do, and we have to look into each specific case every time, and it takes a lot of time.
Cecilia, what would you say are the main obstacles?
The main obstacles, I could just add to that, because we have a discussion in the textile industry when it comes to recycled materials, which we all want to use, and the consumers, will want to buy it or are buying it right now. But then you have the life cycle when it comes to different kind of garments, especially workwear, for example. If you have the recycled fibers in workwear garments, they're not as good. So the customers say, no, these garments, we won't buy them because they don't meet our standards. So that is a kind of an inbuilt problem. But I would go for the legislative side of when it comes to textiles, because we have this avalanche of legislation when it comes to textiles in the EU, and each of the different ones have a good it's a good thought behind it. When it comes to eco-design, for example, this is good. You should think before you even design a textile product or any product. There is a digital passport. That's good that you can trace where the stuff is coming from. But then you have the green claims. There's another one that is, as a part, it's a good thought. But then when you add all this together, it kind of makes an administrative burden for. Let's not forget that the textile companies are SMEs. They are not the big ones that have the big departments to just handle these, or a lot of lawyers and that can really work with these questions. They are small, and then you add all this burden on on European companies, Swedish companies, and then you have the competitiveness from the competitors from outside of Europe. If they're going to sell on the European market, sure, they should be part of the legislation as well. But we know that that is not the case. And China is the big competitor when it comes to textiles and fashion for more specifically, but also for other kind of textiles. And we don't have a level playing field for the companies. So what we're doing are that we're putting a lot of good thoughts in laws, each and every one of them, but when you add them together, it's kind of a burden for the companies of Sweden and Europe that I'm not sure that they will survive this. Not all of them.
Wow. I mean, if we talk about this, about the avalanche of new laws and that the rules are being overly detailed, can you relate to that? I mean, how is Husqvarna impacted by this? Do you view this in a positive or more negative
Well, I
way?
would say primarily positive. I think for a company like Husqvarna, we are totally 100% like dependent on a true sustainable strategy. We have to transform this company. We're part of the problem. A lot of our internal combustion engine products, it's dinosaurs. We have to get out of that technology. We have to transition, and for that reason, I really welcome the winds that have blown from a regulatory standpoint from the EU. So we welcome that. If we now talk about, and I guess the most prominent example is the new CSRD, the new Sustainability Reporting Directive, and the issue is that it's so broad. We talk in Sweden about the hagelbrakare. It seems like that the EU really wants to make sure to not offend any sort of any possible stakeholder. So for that reason, it has become super broad. And it's up to us to do our materiality assessment. We understand that, but it's also politically politically for us, it's hard to, if I would choose, I would only have one thing material, and that is carbon, and that is defossifying our fleet. And I think we lack prioritization from the legislators here, because it's all over the place. And if we now take as an example the CSRD topic around circular economy, the actual standard that is there is super subjective. We talk about that we should, or it states that you should report on the durability of your product. There is no measure whatsoever. There is no comparison. We cannot compare our products to our competitors' products. There are no standardized ways of measuring durability. There is another criteria which is about this, that we have designed the product from a circular principle. That is completely undefined basically today. So it's super open, and I think when the legislators keep too broad scope, we become lost as financial operators, because we don't know what to prioritize basically, and it will be completely open for us to sort of brag about our circularity solutions and the steps ahead, and then our competitors is saying something completely different and we cannot compare. So the whole point of CSRD is like, or was created in order to have a comparability between companies when it comes to sustainability aspects. It's just right now immature. It's getting a little bit lost, and people are spending 70% of their sustainability sort of efforts on fulfilling regulations instead of doing the big shifts.
So what if we look ahead then? What reforms or policy changes do you need from policymakers to help facilitate this?
I think for circularity, well, for all, it's about very clear standardize what can be standardized, and then of course prioritize. Circular economy, if you put it this way, climate change is actually quite easy. We know what it's about. We know we create the greenhouse gas effect because of one gas. I know I'm simplifying, but basically CO2. And circularity is about the complete periodical table. We don't have any clue on what materials to focus on, what to save on. It's just too hard for us. So to pick the vital ones, the really key materials in this case, when it comes to circularity, and I would very much recommend to focus on the scarce metals and materials for batteries, because electrification has to happen, and that brings me to sort of the other urge to politicians, and that is to really create a clear incentive for us to further accelerate decarbonization. We cannot have a gas price at 15 Swedish kronor. That's simply, I mean, we will never get our customers to transform as long as it is this cheap to buy gasoline for internal combustion engine. We have to make some kind of a financial incentive to move over quicker to low carbon and resource smart solutions.
Thank you. Cecilia, what would you say? Briefly.
Briefly, I would say focus on competitiveness. I mean, circularity is here, and we have to get into that. If a company isn't there, they're going to be forced to think about circularity and about their sustainability. And I think a lot of Swedish companies are already there. But you have to do this with competitiveness, together with competitiveness, because otherwise we will regulate the Europe into I don't know what, a dinosaur graveyard or something like that. And we have to lower the amount of administrative burden for companies, and we have to have, when it comes to textiles, more public investments in research and development and innovation. That is really a key factor. Into automation, new materials, circularity, those are the three different areas that you have to put a lot of research into. And deepening a single market and more free trade agreements, so that we can access more markets with good textile products. And very important, not over-implement EU legislation.
Great. So with that, I'd like to welcome our second panel to the stage. A warm applause to you.
Thank you.
And two of our panelists are with us in person tonight, and one is joining us virtually from Estonia. So please welcome Romina Pourmokhtari, Sweden's Minister for Climate and Environment, representing the Liberal Party. Alva Finn, Executive Director of ELF.
Good to see you again.
And on screen, Hanna Lahe, Member of Parliament in Estonia, representing the Estonian Reform Party. It's lovely to see you again, Hanna. Can you hear us clearly?
I can. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Good.
Sorry, what? Ah, sorry. 1 second. I'm going to make you... There we go. So you've all read the report and listened to the author's presentation. So briefly, what are your reflections? What stood out to you? Was there anything particularly good? Something you felt was missing? Anything surprising?
Should I start off?
You can start, yeah.
Okay, I'll take the lead. There's, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's very rare that I get to discuss circular economy to this extent, and I'm always very happy when I get to do that. And I'd like to also mention that besides all of the things that Mattias mentioned that he does, writing this report and working as a professor and so on, he's also part of a delegation for circular economy that provides insight to the government and to me on what policy shifts we can make. So it's I'm very happy to read the report, and hopefully it's also where we can further the work of implementing and integrating it into government policy. I think that, first of all, I think that the focus in the report on promoting both reuse and recycling is a very important perspective. We discuss recycling a lot, and I think Sweden has great progress when it comes to recycling, but on reuse we have a journey ahead of us that I'm very excited to take on. And in the current debate, the attention is mostly given to recycling, so I think that shift in the report is very important. And I also agree with the report on the focus on waste laws. I really think that we have a good area there where we can make improvements that truly have an impact as well. So make sure that our waste laws don't hinder an increased circularity, and promoting reuse should definitely be a priority in this. And also harmonizing these efforts within our internal market is of course very important. And it is really a challenge, the ones that's mentioned in the earlier panel, that we have a lot of different legislation right now. We have the green claims, the eco-design and the passports and all of these that we're developing. And then we always put in, that wording of, and of course we should take care and take into consideration the administrative burden and make sure that they're as low as possible. But I really have the same concern that is mentioned in the debate earlier, and President Macron does as well. And he made this statement, which I truly was think about a lot. He said quite some time ago, he said that EU could die. Our earlier models aren't working, and if we overregulate and underinvest, this is gonna kill us basically. And that might be quite a harsh statement, but that's truly the reality that a lot of industries, companies, and specifically small business owners in Europe are truly suffering under. So one thing that I've been very pleased to be able to take part of course, was the development of the CBAM regulation, which I think is a good starting point to also regulate the imports that we make of products that are produced on a totally different market and with totally different regulations. So a lot of work to do ahead, and the report truly puts its finger on a lot of the most important things. May I mention one more thing? Yeah. This always happens, Anna, when you invite me to this panel. One more thing is, of course, the very important topic that we rarely discuss as well, which is the e-commerce development and how it's affecting all of this, because it's such a big impact. And especially from my perspective, I look at the younger generation. And their, consumer behavior is quite concerning, and the increased popularity for companies such as Shein and Temu and all of those, we truly need to regulate that, not least from a chemicals perspective, where people don't know that they themselves have a responsibility for the chemicals that they import in those products, because they do by Swedish law, but this is not regulated enough. So there's a big challenge as well, which the report mentioned, and I really appreciate that it brought that up as well. Now I'm gonna...
That's great, yeah. Alva, what are your thoughts on the paper?
Yeah, I advise everybody here to also read Planned Obsolescence, because it gives you a history of where this kind of like throwaway culture came from. And it's another publication that we did with Fores, and it was a really good follow-up to that. And I think, I think the focus on industry policy is right, because that's what everything is going to be about, competitiveness now at EU level. Basically, that's the whole thing coming from the Draghi report, the Letta report. These are reports written by former Italian prime ministers, which everybody is obsessed with in Brussels. But I think it's important that we see things through the lens of making Europe compete. And one piece of advice that I would give you also, if you can, is put that in the context of this in your report. Talk about the geopolitics, the security approach to not relying on others and actually recycling some of the resources that we already have and some of the technology we already have. Another thing that we work a lot on is tech neutrality, and not making decisions in Brussels about the end technology that will combat climate change and help us with the environment. Of course, there's a lot of mistrust nowadays of capitalism and the market and everything like that. But if we look back even 30 or 40 years ago, it was a different type of capitalism where we kept things for longer, things were built to last. I think we just need to go back to that, and reclaim that type of, market and capitalism again. Another thing that I think is great about the report is that you focus on public procurement, which is another leveraging, market tool that we can use to increase circularity. I think all the regulation that you've just mentioned is it's like it's like a big giant wave falling down on our industry. But what has to come with that regulation cannot be the only market lever, right? Investment in technology, in skills, all of these kind of things. We're missing out on that, and I think that should be. It's not bad that we're focusing now on competitiveness, because I think that it will lead to an investment in these kind of skills in industry again, which is important. One last point is that also I think when we are thinking about circular economy, we can also think of social economy. I know a lot of SMEs now have not just an environmental objective, but also a social objective when they're setting up small to medium enterprises, because they want to help respond to the societal challenges that we're facing. So yeah, I would also just underline that it's not just circular, it's also social economy that we want to be, I think, encouraging, and we have to incentivize that too. Not just big industry, but small industry as well.
Hannah, we'd love to hear your perspective on the Pulse paper as well.
Hi again. Thanks so much for inviting me, Anna. Hi to the panelists and to the ones before us. And thank you, Carl and Mattias, for this report. I'm maybe trying not to reflect the same things that the other panelists already did, but I would like to say that it's very important that they mentioned communication in the report, because we have all different sorts of regulations, both from the EU and nationally, but when we look at the way that people act, how much they know what to do and what not to do, at least I can say in Estonia, there are quite many myths and quite many legends that go around the town saying that, you know, if you recycle, then the recycling vehicle will come and they will put everything to the same box and so on, and then nothing gets recycled. And it's these kinds of things that live on mostly in the heads of maybe the older generation that is not very much understanding of the recycling benefits. So that's one thing. And also changing the way we think. I think e-commerce is a big thing, which Romina already mentioned. There is so much of it that is not under our control and probably will never be, because, you know, our market is not only the EU, but we're in a global market. But regulating our economy here so that when someone wants to bring something in, they have to take that into account. I like that there was this climate and resource connection of how much we are in need of critical resources. I know there are many things being done on the EU level about this, about our dependency and so on, but we can never be fully independent with critical resources. We just don't have them in our countries. But just mentioning it and addressing the problem, I think it's very important. And lastly, I would like to mention the fact that member state role in this whole circular economy policy is very important. I think we really need to standardize, which was said in the last panel as well. For example, Estonia has this really great bottle recycling system. I think Sweden has it as well. I know that Finland has, and Latvia, probably Lithuania. I think the southern countries in the EU don't have it. But, you know, we all have these systems, yet if I take a bottle from Estonia and we come to Sweden, I can't recycle it there. So I think it's just really weird that we all have the same systems, but, you know, they're not working the same way. So standardizing is one thing. Also, I think there's this like funny paradox or like loop that European Commission will fine us if we're not reaching our recycling targets. Estonia is probably going to get a fine. We're trying to work on that. It's a lot of money, and it means that the work, you know, has to be done by member states. At the same time, we are always waiting for the next EU regulation, the next policy paper that maybe will fix it all. Then when the regulation and policy paper, when they're, happening, they're being released, they give us directions, then we complain about the bureaucracy and the regulations. So it's like this endless loop of blaming each other who's responsible, but I think the main responsibility lies on the member states, and just emphasizing that is really important.
Thank you for your reflections. So if we dive into the challenges, you touched upon that briefly, Romina. What do you perceive as the main obstacles to advancing the circular economy?
Well, there's a lot of gaps. There's a lot of gaps when it comes to waste laws, when it comes to standardizations, which we've discussed. And I think one thing that I'm thinking of when Hannah mentions the thing about the plastic bottles and the recycling is she's probably just like me, bringing her, Estonian bottles back to Estonia because you're a bit obsessed with the thought of recycling. And I've thought about that as well. But then when I got to the negotiating table and we're discussing standardization of recycling plastic bottles, I'm all of a sudden very concerned because the Swedish system might be broken up when it comes to regulating it on an EU level. So we might lose our fantastic, well-functioning system in Sweden because I have to negotiate with Greece and with Italy. And also when it comes to these goals of recycling, I urge you all to take a look on which countries are well in line with their recycling goals and which countries are not, because the numbers are quite surprising. And if you compare them to the reality of the circulation of plastic in our different countries, it just doesn't add up. It's as if the countries that are doing their homework are losing, whilst the countries that are not aren't, and that's a problem. So I think that in reality, translating all of these great ideas and initiatives to legislation is the biggest, trickiest part. And I think that there was also a very good point raised by Mattias during the presentation of the report on this, that, okay, what happens when we regulate have regulations for companies that they need to have a certain level of quality in their products. Okay, so they might find incentives to actually make the compartments expensive and to lessen the quality of their products. And those types of consequences of legislation are very hard to take into consideration and to have in mind when you develop legislation. And I think that's one of the biggest hinders and barriers. And I've spoken on that when I became Minister of Climate and Environment, I had a certain amount of goals that I wanted to reach. And circular economy is definitely proven to be the most difficult one to tackle when it comes to my priorities. It's very difficult. But I think, having a life cycle perspective, very important, and the global aspect, very important. So we're very engaged from Sweden's side on the global negotiations on a plastic pollution treaty right now, which might sound a bit far off, but you need to start at the chemicals aspect, right, and at the production of the products. And extended producer responsibility is something I'm very keen on developing, both on a European level, on a global level. And we cooperate quite a lot with a few partners that we have, not least France, but also Denmark. And hopefully now I have my wonderful Estonian colleague as well, Yoko Alender, a great Minister of Climate and Environment. So hopefully more cooperation with progressive countries to further the legislation. But it can be quite tricky to hit the right point and actually get the result you're looking for. And I think that's the biggest difficulty.
We're running out of time, but Alva, what do you say are the main obstacles, and what do you think what would be the most crucial action that the EU can take?
Yeah, I think the cultural and market shifts are the most important things to get right, and that takes a mixture of regulation but also incentivization. And I don't think we're there yet. I think a lot of people would like to participate in a more circular economy, but they just don't have access to it. You talked about the younger generation and the obsession with e-commerce. That's something that we need to take on, but it's also because they don't have the money to buy the quality goods that older people do. Mm-hmm. So I think affordability is key in that respect. I think CBAM is a very good idea. But it isn't working for all industries, right? We've had engaged with, for example, the aluminium industry at ELF, and when energy prices became much higher, obviously the way that CBAM had been laid out for them, actually it wasn't working. So these are things that need to be revisited. I think great in the report also that we talk about revisiting very old legislation, which is actually counterproductive to circular economy, including on things like PFAS. So bridging the gaps, including relooking at old legislation, which again will have more probably regulatory burden in the future, but that's what we will need to do. We'll have to reassess what is working, what isn't working anymore, and maybe bring it in as part of the requirement for putting new legislation legislation forward. You know, we have all of these environmental standards when we're meant to be looking at when new regulation is brought in, and circularity should be one of those things, I think, going forward. Also, consumer rights in general. What are the opportunities for consumer rights, and how do we get that right to force the shift more quickly? And then again, yeah, tech neutrality, not making decisions. We've been doing it now in the Green Deal. I think we will probably see less of that, but some of that legislation has already gotten into place, and there are ways that it's being implemented that is not tech neutral. So that's a big, I think, challenge going forward.
Hannah, what would you say? What circular initiatives or policy reforms would you like to promote or implement in Estonia?
Thanks. I would like to add to the last speaker, the political will is a big problem. For example, in Estonia, we're going to have this big, we generally call it like a waste reform in the parliament very soon. And when I talk to the entrepreneurs, I talk to the third sector, I talk to the people involved in circular economy, in industry generally, then what they say is that we should have done this 10 years ago. And I know there's no point of talking what we should have done back in the day, but still it makes me think, you know, why we didn't take these decisions. It would have cost us a lot less and we would be a lot more successful and probably even richer today. But, you know, the situation is what it is. So political will, one thing. And I talked about communication before. I think it's very important to mention formal education as well. And if I talk about communication, I mean communication for adults and older people, because at least in Estonia, there is this saying that our kids will teach us, you know. They are in this green program in their kindergarten. They're teaching us how to recycle, and they're always scolding us for putting the things in the wrong bins. Like, that's cool. But, you know, if you look at the population, you look at the people who are in power, they're not kids. It's not the kids that are the problem if we talk about consumer habits and, of course, the systemic change. But in means of formal education, bringing circular economy to universities, to different majors that already exist, but also opening up new ones. I have this good example from Estonia. So in the eastern part of Estonia, the Ida-Virumaa county, we mine oil shale, which is very similar to coal. And this gives us a byproduct of this oil shale dust. We use this to create different products for construction. And there is university in the same area, which this autumn started to teach circular economy. And it's very widely based on what is happening in that area to find solutions and to innovate. So things like that, I think it's very important. Also, you know, in engineering, in mathematics, in STEM areas, maybe not in STEM areas, maybe in communication majors and so on. And another problem I find is that if we look at the last European Parliament elections, the rise of populism and how, I know I'm making this a very broad answer, but how they are shooting holes into our plans and how they're really not understanding the connection in the circular economy. I underline the economy part, so that this is not some green agenda that, you know, these green crazy people are pushing. It's good for the economy. I think we're heavily missing that. But if you explain it well enough, then I think we can even fight the populists with that. I'm ending with a hopeful note, but you know, you have to be positive in politics, otherwise you would not survive.
Yeah, I agree. So on that positive, optimistic note, we unfortunately have to end today's seminar. But first, Mattias would like to come up and just clarify one thing.
Yeah, sorry. Many thanks also for the comments, nice comments on the report.
Yes.
on behalf of Calumi. But just want to, because it's nice that you mentioned standards a lot. And I actually forgot to mention one thing. I'm head of the Swedish committee for the ISO work when it comes to circular economy. Yeah. But I should have also mentioned that Sweden has taken a lead when it comes to European standardization regarding circular economy. And I think this is a golden opportunity for you to be engaged, because it will be more actions coming from EU requiring standards. So it's not all is set in the legalization, but in standards. So it's something for you in the politics and companies and organizations. Join the work. We can do something. Thank you.
Ooh, nice. Very nice. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to Mattias and Carl for this great and insightful report, and to our two panels for their very valuable contributions. And of course, thanks to everyone in the audience for being with us here today. And as Ulrika mentioned at the outset, this is the first of 3 policy papers that we will publish this year in collaboration with ELF. And the next paper will be released on November 1st, and that paper will focus on negative emissions and what incentives and funding mechanisms that are needed to scale up carbon removal technologies. A highly relevant and sexy topic, if I say so myself. And this paper will be launched in Helsinki, Finland. And if you're interested in the event but can make it to Finland, don't worry, you can catch the presentation later on our YouTube channel. Thank you.